Hello, everyone. It is Scott from Tiger Talk. You're here for an interview with Coach McDaniels, who, of course, coached for McKinley for many years, and Warren Harding. And Becca and I interviewed him. We had a little trouble with Zoom. When Massillon and McKinley get together, does everything work out? Always not so much. So we ended up just jumping on the phone and I recorded the audio, so there will be nothing to see except me right here, which is a pretty good thing to see. But you can listen to this really great conversation from the McKinley side of Massillon McKinley Week. Very respectful. I mean, what a great guy to be our first guest that, is from the other side. Of course, he did coach at Massillon for 1 year, so it kind of still counts. But I hope you guys really enjoy this. Audio only, but enjoy our conversation with Coach McDaniels.
In 1997, Coach McDaniels was named National High School Football Coach of the Year while leading the Canton McKinley Bulldogs teams to the state and national, that's amazing, titles. He coached famous people like Percy Snow, Mike Doss, Maurice Claret, who I remember I loved watching, Mario Manningham, and he coached the current head coach of the Bulldogs, Antonio Hall. He was 26 years as a head coach. I've done a lot with Nate, and I don't know if I could do 26 years. I'm a little nervous about that. Coached for 40 years and was named to the High School Coaches Hall of Fame. And he was a 2 times finalist for the NFL High School Coach of the Year, 2004 and 2010, which I find absolutely amazing. And I'm floored that we get to talk to you. So welcome to Scott and I's Tiger Talk, Coach McDaniels.
A nice introduction. I appreciate that. Happy to talk to you.
Yeah, after all his credits, we don't have any more time for the show.
I know, he's so famous.
We are so excited to have you. I don't think there's a man around that has ruined more Saturday afternoons for me than you. And we want to start off by, to you, what are the similarities and what are the differences that you see between Massillon and McKinley?
Well, obviously, my view of McKinley is far greater than my inside view of Massillon. I was an assistant coach there for 1 year, when I gave up head coaching. But I have a view of them, from the eastern side of Stark County. I think there are actually more differences than similarities. Would be a really long conversation. But one of the differences is that Massillon has forever been a one high school town, and Canton went from 4 high schools to 2 high schools, and during my entire tenure at McKinley, there were 2 high schools, and so it wasn't an undivided community in Canton like it is in Massillon. It is always, from where I view this, it's always been an undivided community, one high school, total support from the community, and Canton's support is actually still divided because the Lincoln Lions from the past will never die, and polar bears will never, still exist in people of my generation. But the entire community supported, Massillon in all efforts, and a large part of the community in Canton, but not all of it, was behind McKinley. So that's a major difference. I often viewed the makeup of the kids as being similar. The makeup of the staff, there were similarities because there are more than just 1 or 2 people who coached for both teams, and some of those people are dated. Matt Leisure, who coached for me, also had a tenure there at Massillon, and he played for me, and he now coaches for Antonio. Dave Gable, who was a long time, he grew up in Massillon, played for Massillon, he both coached at Massillon and he coached for me for my entire tenure here in Canton. I think both communities care, or both school systems care an awful lot about the programs. They want the programs to be successful, and head coaches need the support of those people above us. The principals and the ADs and the superintendent. We need their support to be successful, and I think both communities get it. I think you guys to a greater extent, because the superintendents I had, their attention was divided, with Timken High School, and my principal was fully supportive, obviously, but both have history that dates back, obviously, a long time. I think they're two of the three public schools that best represent really quality high school performance apart from the parochial. That's off the top of my head, and I gave you a rambling answer, but.
What did you get in trouble for coming over to Massillon that year? Like, were people angry?
Lost friends, and there are people who unfriended me, and not socially on Facebook or Twitter, just socially. They unfriended me, and they have. Yeah, I committed a cardinal sin. I was just an old guy trying to wean myself out of being a head coach, and I drove for 2 years and was an assistant coach at Solon. So that's 2 hours a day in a car, and I got invited to coach 10 minutes away, and so I took it. But yeah, that was not popular with everybody.
So I don't know. I mean, you lived through a week at Massillon. Massillon versus McKinley week. What does a week at McKinley look like compared to a week at Massillon? I mean, it's crazy. Like, we had 3 things a day. We have a lunch every day. We have prayer breakfast. I mean, there's some of those things that we do with the McKinley. But what do you guys do? Everything that we do, or what? I mean, what does it look like for you?
The shared experiences, whether it's the prayer breakfast, or whether it's the Rotary luncheon, the shared experience. We both had the same experience. I have a feeling that the affection and the intensity, for the rivalry, might be taken to a slightly higher degree in mass. And I cared about that. That's one of the things that I think that helped us be successful. All I cared about, we attended those functions together, but we weren't responsible for their success or failure. We weren't responsible for the success of the Rotary luncheon or the prayer breakfast or any of those joined and mutual functions, but we were responsible for the way we practiced and how we prepared and how we played game day. And again, that doesn't make me an expert, at that answer, but I had the impression that it was just maybe a degree or two more intense in Massillon than it was in Canton.
I might agree with you. I might, but I haven't lived it over there, but I've lived it here, and I know our first year moving here, this is our 8th year. I was like, what is happening? I got no sleep that week. I was like, this is new, but now I've embraced it and I enjoy it. So you've coached a lot of games. Is this the greatest rivalry in football?
Oh, I can't imagine the greater one. Unless we leave the high school ranks, if we consider, college or NFL, perhaps there's something greater, but I can't imagine anything more intense or greater or with a longer history than McKinley and Massillon. I know we like to think of ourselves as the oldest, and greatest high school rivalry football in the country.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
In our time, because I've been going to the games since the 70s, And, Becca may not notice it, but you and I will notice that attendance is down. I think local coverage is down. It's not quite the same when you and I were there at that 100th game where you couldn't have fit, a poodle in that stadium. Why do you think that's happened over the last 20 to 30 years?
Well, let me begin by saying that I am grateful that I was part of it in the 80s and 90s. I came here as an assistant in 80, and we had, and we're just being honest, we had considerable success.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm grateful that I was part of that in the 80s and 90s. And I don't know if it'll ever be like that again. I agree with you about, again, we don't even have a functioning newspaper in Canton, like we used to. I mean, the sports page in the sports section was huge. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. It's online, and the paper that the hard copy paper, it isn't worth the purchase. Attendance at all McKinley games is far less than it was through those 80s and 90s. I think the city of Canton has undergone significant change. Until you brought that up, I wasn't certain that change was also obvious in Massillon. But
well, I sit in section 14, and which is on the away side. So I would sit right next to your fans. When I was a kid and a 20-something, section 14 was totally full, and it's very empty now. So attendance is down at Massillon. And it might not be as much as McKinley, but attendance is down. I think a lot of that is Massillon and Canton are losing jobs and things like that. And, Massillon's not Division I anymore. But I feel like even the coverage, and I guess you're right, we don't have local papers anymore. But it's just sad for me because I wish Becca could have seen the games that you coached at at McKinley, at Massillon. It was so much bigger.
Well, I did watch the 100th game because we have Touchdown Down Club, because when we played, actually, I hadn't seen it until we played St. Ed's. We played St. Ed's this year, and they said that was an instant classic with the 100th game. So I actually didn't know a lot about the 100th game. It's embarrassing, but it's true. And so that was when I actually saw what the stadium was. I'd seen the old, the old black and white ones, but never in color when the stadium was so packed like it was for that 100th game. And I was like, this is crazy. I would love to see that again. Yeah. What do we need to do to get people to come out like that again?
In the 80s and 90s, we had a lot of Saturday games. And so we scouted a lot at Massillon, and I think we sat in section 14 up against the
You did. You would go up. My dad would be like, that's the McKinley coach. Get him!
That's where you seated us, so we had a great place to scout.
What do you think was your secret? Because you were very successful. Again, did you only lose one time to Massillon?
No. If you count the 16 years that I was there as a head coach from 82 to 97, we were 11-6.
Okay.
We were 5-3 at Massillon. We were 5-3 at Fawcett Stadium in Canton, and we were 1-0 in the Rubber Bowl.
And I remember that game, buddy.
Everybody talks about the Rubber Bowl. Yeah. What do you think made you so successful against Massillon? I mean, what was your secret? Because you went to Warren too, and they said that you coached for Warren and you beat them when you were the Warren head coach too. So what made you successful?
We were 5-1 against Massillon at Warren, and it's interesting that you asked me that because, it's at some point, and you're probably too young to remember, Becca, but when Michael Jordan was at his highest, other opposing teams came up with something they called the Jordan rules. and they had rules for how you played against Michael Jordan and how you were going to defeat the Bulls. Well, at some point I joked in the past about the Massillon rules, and I was it was half truth and half joke. But there were a number of things, that we did that I thought contributed to our success. Now, whether they legitimately are, but I've been asked that question before. But I believed in certain things, and it got good results. One of the things, and I'm not going to reveal all those secrets.
You're retired. Tell me your secrets.
of a win, desperately. No. One of the things that I learned early is that I felt like McKinley's focus was on Massillon way before we played our opening game.
Mm-hmm.
And it remained upon Massillon, through the course of the season. And maybe not in obvious ways, and maybe not overtly, but there was an obsession, and we don't think of obsessions as being good things.
Right.
I didn't. It's taken an emotion to an extreme. And so I, in many ways, attempted to play that down. One of the things that I believe was there's no such thing as a big game, because if this is a big game, well, what was last week and what's next week? And I sort of sold, not just the players, but the coaches on the concept of, the most important game we play is the one that we're playing this week. And then we'll manage that outcome, and then we'll go on to the next one. But we're certainly not going to focus on week 10 when we got 9 games and 9 opponents and 9 weeks of practice, ahead of that point in time. And so I think I diminished, that focus on Massillon way before it should have been on Massillon. I think we managed that pretty well. One of the other things that I think that we did is we were very willing to play kids 1.5 ways. I didn't want my best players standing by my side for half the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a lot of 2-way starters, but we rested a lot of those guys on offense. They never came off the field defensively. The guys that were capable of playing in 2 ways. So I had a kid named DeMarlo Rozier who was a great free.
So good.
He never got off the field defensively, but we played tailback by committee. And in that 97 season, we did it at tight end, we did it at fullback, we did it at tailback, we did it at wide receiver. Those guys never came off the field defensively, and we had enough depth that we could share time on offense. So essentially, we were having our best players on the field all the time, almost.
Right.
Okay?
If you could have picked a player from the 1997 team that you thought would be the head coach of McKinley in 2022, who would you have picked?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. It wasn't going to be one of the McDaniels boys, because one of them was a teacher. They majored in something other than education at the suggestion of their father.
The same thing. We do the same.
But I don't know that I would have anticipated or guessed that Antonio would be that guy, but he's certainly very representative and very worthy.
Yeah.
I love Antonio.
I love Antonio. I think he's scary. I think you got to give him a few more years, but I think he will. He's the guy. Yeah.
He's easy to love.
Yeah.
He wasn't a player. He is as a person. Yep.
So the question is, do you think that you could beat Coach Moore? Do you think you could beat Coach Moore? If you were coaching, do you think you could outcoach Coach Moore?
I never thought of it that way either.
Yeah, you didn't?
And we went through some head coaches at Massillon.
Yeah.
From 82 to 97.
Yeah.
And again, that was never our focus. I remember hearing, from players past and coaches past, if Massillon had 3-a-day practices in August, then McKinley had 3-a-day practices. If Massillon had one long practice with a short break in between, then McKinley. I ended that. We were not going to run and manage our program based on what Massillon did.
I love that.
Because the situations and the circumstances were never identical. And so we had to do things that was in the best interest of our program and our players and our circumstance, whether it was, the copy or the Eastern Stark County version of what Massillon was doing. That was not going to be our focus. And so, they've always had good coaches, but our focus, and this is another thing, one of these secrets that I'm not supposed to our focus was always on us. And we studied our previous game performance and that film much more than we studied the opponents. In high school, they're only going to play maybe 2 or 3 different coverages, maybe 1 or 2 different fronts. I may be dating myself a little bit, but even at the end, we made and a listening effort than we did devote to understanding the opponent. And that's also a prescription that stuck with me to Trumbull County. That we also did that in Warren. Don't fix the mistakes we're making while we're winning. They cost us against a really good opponent in the future. So I don't know that I ever outcoached anybody. Best I could. So I don't know.
It's pretty amazing though. Like you were basically teaching them to do their job, which is really cool.
And if some young head coach say, "Hey, Coach McD, can you give me one bit of advice?" I'd advise them to do that. Devote more time toward the mistakes that you made and the corrections that you have to fix. Rather than spending this enormous amount of time on the opponent, because you can't do anything about them. And if we can correct and improve and attempt, we played to a standard, and so when we were rocking and rolling, we could win games and not be happy because we didn't measure up to the standard. And when you do that, it's not imposed by me. It's self-imposed because we sort of coached that way and the kids picked up on that. In 97, the great example, we beat the Tigers in game 10, retained our ranking as the number 1 team in Ohio and the mythical national ranking. And they interviewed me on the field after the game. And by the time I got into the locker room, I walked in and they were not happy. There was no raucous, joyous celebration that was making the paint peel from the ceiling. We won the game. We were 10-0, and they weren't happy with the way they played. And I knew we had something then. I knew it before then, but that was.
You knew you were going to win the state championship then.
Sort of playing to the standard rather than to the outcome. If the standard, we got the outcome we wanted.
I like hearing that you weren't happy with that win because I wasn't happy that you won that year either.
Miserable, okay?
Tell me about the immaculate reception at the Rubber Bowl against St. Ignatius. I know we're here to talk about Massillon McKinley, but that St. Ignatius win, I actually was there because my cousin was in 9th grade and she wanted to go to the game, and I said, I'll go watch McKinley play Ignatius. And then I ended up rooting for McKinley, God help me. And you won at the end. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we played them in the regular season, and it was an instant classic, like your St. Ed's game was. It was an instant classic. I think we won 35-32.
Wow.
We had O-line stand. I mean, it had everything that that they were two undefeated teams, and they were both really good. So the second time you have to play a really good opponent, that's tough. And the loser has the psychological edge. And remind me to go back to the 1980 game when I finish this story. So anyway, we're scheduled to play Ignatius in the Rubber Bowl, and they're doing things significantly different off defensively the first half, and we're struggling, and it is not what we anticipated. But we get a late touchdown just before half. And it's now shift to the fourth quarter and about 7 minutes remaining, and we're being beaten 19-7. And we got a touchdown to close that gap slightly, but with about a minute to go, we're still behind, and the McKinley faithful have departed the Rubber Bowl already on 77 headed south. Many of them. But we are in a hurry up mode. And we threw it an underneath route to a really good receiver we had by the name of Matt Curry. And the inside receiver was supposed to take the top off the coverage. And Matt Curry was open, and it was one of those plays where you're going to throw it short, but he was one of the track champions we had the previous spring in, the 100 meters and the 4x1, all that kind of stuff. So we were going to get it to a really good guy and give him room to run. It bounces off his face mask, and Freddie Wilcox was the guy that was supposed to take the top off the coverage. He should have been 35, 40 yards downfield. Well, he wasn't. He was about 12 or 15 or 18 yards downfield, and he turned to launch the play. The ball bounces off of Matt's face mask, goes right into Freddie's hands, and he does a pivot and runs down to the 1 yard. So it was the immaculate deflection.
Oh, deflection. That's what it was.
That's so good.
Freddie is famous to this day for that. And then we scored. We killed the clock on first down, and then ran it in for the winning score. And the rest then became
history.
It was an amazing game.
So 1980.
I came here in 1980 and hadn't really seen a McKinley Massillon game. I'd seen bits and pieces. They did it on local television, but I didn't necessarily always get that in Orrville, Ohio, where I grew up. So I'm in the game, and we're 8-1, and Massillon I believe is either 9-0 or 8-1. They're very good. They're very good too, and we beat them at week 10 at Massillon 16-7. And back then there weren't 16 qualifiers. There were 2. So they qualified and we qualified, and we had to play the next week at Fawcett. And all of this hoopla and all of this activity that you're experiencing during the week 10, well, none of that happens in week 11 in camp. No bonfire, no Rotary luncheon, no prayer, prayer breakfast. There was none of that. And we didn't manage our success well enough, apparently, because you beat us week 11.
Oh, no.
Huge lesson for me, because in the space of 7 days as a new guy to the rivalry, I experienced both victory and defeat. And ABC used to do the thrill of victory and the tragedy of defeat, or whatever, with whatever that was. But that was a great experience. And every person new to the rivalry ought to have that.
Yeah.
Because they understand the rivalry totally in
1 week. So you coached both your sons, so our son is a freshman. So, he's like coming up through this. Like, was that hard for you and your wife? Like, did you find yourself, I'm just so like, I'm like, this is going to be disaster. Like what was that like? And like how do you handle when you lost to Massillon? You know, your son played the 100th game and you lose. Like how do you handle, you know, a win loss in your household when your kids playing?
Well, he's the one that missed the extra point that would have put it into another overtime, you know.
Oh my goodness.
But the thing that was good for me is that somewhere, well, actually everywhere, that my kids played before they played for me. Some other basketball coach let them start. Some other football coach made them a starter. Some other baseball coach, you know, so I wasn't the first head coach in their life to put them in the starting lineup. And we moved into the city because I wanted my kids to grow up in a very diverse environment. If I was going to work there, we were going to go to school there, and so they had earned respect and earned the right to compete to play well before they got to me, because other people were making the decisions that they should play. So I don't know that it shocked anybody, maybe other than the parents of the kid that they beat out, that they would end up, you know, playing and playing, you know, well for us. The handling the defeat thing was especially tough for my wife, and I'm sure you know as well as many wives know that when you don't win, people can be cruel and people can be critical, and they don't necessarily mind that you hear, you know, the cruelty and the criticism that they have to share. So she learned to move and isolate herself in Fawcett Stadium so that she was far away from the experts and the critics as she could be. And as you know, too, they can be critical even when you win.
Yeah.
But it was tough, you know, losing the 100th game. But we both qualified for the playoffs, and we knew that there was an opportunity to meet them again if we did what we were supposed to do and they did too. And lo and behold, we had the 101st game.
That's enough, sir. Let's stop the story right there. No one really
and
cares.
He won that one. So he's saying what happened.
Nah, nobody really cares what happened after that. Who even remembers?
My wife.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. You know, I do think it might be harder for the wives. I film, so like I wear a hat and stuff, so sometimes people don't even realize I'm on the sideline. So sometimes for me anymore, I think you just have to grow thick skin. I just start laughing. Like I'm like, you people, like, you know, it is fun. But I will say, you know, I've enjoyed the experience, but I agree with your wife. I found that moving sometimes is better because I mean you can't control other people's opinions or mouths. It's their opinions, and you just got to keep doing what you're doing and, you know, living the dream.
Yeah. The other thing, you know, in reference to your son, I was too demanding and too difficult on Joshua because he was the oldest of the two that played, and I sort of made it. I sort of forced him to make it clear to everybody that he deserved to play beyond reason. And that was his junior year. And I noticed and I figured out that was wrong. That was not fair. You know, just because he happened to be my son, to be unreasonable about how he practiced or how he played. And so I toned that down by the time he was a senior. And then I didn't make that mistake with Benjamin.
But I think it paid off with Josh, because isn't he the head coach of the Raiders?
It paid off. It
so maybe it might have paid off there a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, and Benjamin's, he's a quarterback's coach, right?
He's a receiver coach with the Houston Texans.
Yeah, so they're both where it's warm, and yep. You're in Ohio. Yeah.
Won't be at the Massillon McKinley game because I'll be in Vegas.
Oh, he's going to the Raiders game.
Yeah.
Or he's going to bet on the game. He's going to Vegas so he can place his bet.
Out there on the line. They'll have a line on it. I'm sure that we were always told. But no, Benjamin and Josh play each other this week, so we'll be in Vegas.
Oh, do you have to like wear a split jersey? What do you do?
We'll wear black bottoms, and I haven't figured that out yet.
That's so good.
Played last year. Josh was with the Patriots, and Ben was still with Houston, and they were both red and blue. So we got the colors right.
You were good.
Yeah, but we got to figure something out.
I would just wear red and black and just say you're rooting for McKinley at home.
Good idea.
So I have a question. This is my big question that I really want to know because, as I said, I've been a Massillon fan forever, and I've always seen how Stark County treats Massillon from the inside. I'm curious, how do you see Massillon's place in Stark County from the outside? I know you were there for a year, but you're still a citizen of that area. I'm just curious, how's Massillon seen in Stark County?
Well, I think that the people who didn't coach against them as often as I did, counting the 6 games at Warren Hart, I don't think that they view him the same way that I do. I always thought that it takes 2 to have the greatest rivalry in high school football, and that we needed to be respectful of each other.
And you were, and thank you for that.
And when I went to Warren, you got to help me with the
Shepis?
Yes. Rick and I got together. We scrimmaged one year, and that was a step 1 toward resuming play because there was something that went wrong in the late 80s between Harding and Massillon, and they stopped playing. And they should. Those two tradition-rich public schools should play each other. And so we resumed that competition. And so I think there's a lot of resentment for Massillon, and as I indicated to you earlier, I didn't concern myself with what they did. They do what they do, and their circumstance, their situation, that's their business. But I think a lot of people make their business, make Massillon's business their business, and I think they're overly critical, and I don't choose to go that way. But I think that largely there's a lot of resentment for Massillon.
It's been interesting for me as a fan because, I can get how you could be annoyed. I get it because we live for football and that's crazy. But to me, it's always been about family and community. And I don't think that spills out through the rest of Stark County. But I would feel like McKinley can kind of see that because for you certainly, it's all about family. Your kids coach there. I don't know. It's just so hard to explain to people why I still care after all these years. But so I love to get an opinion from the outside looking in because I just grew up with it since I was a little kid. So I don't know any better.
Sure. I don't know. I don't know if this still exists, but some of the people who accused Massillon of doing some things that they weren't supposed to do. They at one time refused to play them in anything.
Right.
And I don't know if that status quo remains, but that's, come on, man.
It does still remain. Unfortunately, I've experienced it, so I don't understand that either. Because you're just losing money for your school, so.
Playoffs, so they might meet during the tournament, but they won't play them in the regular season.
Correct. We still have that.
Okay, so that hasn't changed.
Yeah. Which is weird to me too, because I don't understand that. I don't understand that. But I'm glad that we have the Massillon McKinley rival, and I'm glad that we have football, and I love what you've instilled. I love what you've done. I'm so excited that you came on and talked to us, because just reading your resume was like just so amazing, and hearing you talk about what you did as a coach means a lot to me as a coach, head coach's wife, because I see Nate doing a lot of that, like focusing on what's important, because if you're disciplined, like you were talking about, and you're focused on you, then that spills out after football, because football eventually ends for everybody. It ends. What are you going to do after football? What are you going to contribute to yourself? Who are you going to be after football? And I know you didn't really speak on that, but I could tell by what you're saying and how you coached, it's very similar to what we try to instill in our boys here at Massillon. And I think, again, that's what Antonio Hall is working towards, his goal too. So it's I think there's not a Massillon McKinley. There's not a Massillon without McKinley. There's not McKinley without Massillon. We need each other. And I love this week. I love the banter, and I love what you've done and the stories that you've told, because it just, I don't know, it's very exciting. I love to hear the history. I think it's important, for people to remember, what it really is about.
I also I believed in playing quality competition, and so we were willing to play the best parochial schools during the regular season. I believed in that because it made us better. Well, we quality competition just a few miles away. We were certainly going to play them, and they made us better. And one of the things that we hope that the kids learn from being part of what we do is, and there's many lessons, too many to count, but one of the most important was that we hope they learn to manage things well that couldn't be changed. An official drops a flag and it's a bad call, we got to manage that. We got a rainy, windy night, we got to manage that. Well, there's 1,000 things in your life that you manage well because you can't change them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we did all of that too. We were preaching and teaching other than X's and O's. And I know your husband does that too.
Yeah, a lot of that. Yeah. But it's nice to know that it's on both sides of the ball.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, this was so much fun. I'm so glad you came on. We really appreciate it. And, you certainly coached some great games that I got to watch. And as I said, sometimes you hurt my feelings. And sometimes we hurt your feelings. It all's the same, and that's part of football, and we love it. And thank you for everything that you've done.
No problem. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, and sorry for all the technical difficulties, but we enjoyed having you on. And I won't, I have to say it, TIG.
ERS. Thank you so much for listening. Again, we're really sorry we didn't have video. It just didn't quite work out that way. Please subscribe to Tiger Talk, because that was kind of like begging, wasn't it? It was a little too begging. Thank you so much for listening. I thought that was a great interview. I just loved his honesty and his respect. Please be sure that you subscribe to Tiger Talk, because we're going to try to do more interviews like this, and they may just be dropped out we may not be coming out Thursday morning or whatever, so subscribe. And then also, we do have the real Tiger Talk episode this week, so don't miss that, because I announced the hype song of the year. And I know it's all killing you. What's the hype song going to be? Well, you got to tune in to find out. So be sure you watch the regular episode as well, and there's all video and everything for that. And I know a lot of people are asking, hey, Scott, was your grandpa mayor of Massillon? Well, there's a new book out called Myth or Mayor by my son, Alexander Ryan. You can get it on Amazon. There's a copy at the Massillon Library. And if you're interested in Massillon history about in the 60s and where I come from, which, that's pretty good, you can go to Scott Ryan Productions and pick up a copy. It's a very interesting story about whether my grandpa was or was not mayor, and I wrote the afterword to it, so I wanted to give my son, because if you see the other show, the other McKinley show. You see, I got to balance things out. So I got to also promote his book. Again, subscribe to Tiger Talk. It helps us. Please share these videos out. That helps us. And again, I gotta thank Becca Moore for doing this show with me. I love doing it, and it's an honor. I think she's a great co-host. And everyone at Stark Media Team and TJ, who does all the editing. See, we didn't have TJ and we don't have video. See what happens when they let us run this? So thanks again. Go Tigers. And thanks very much to Mr. McDaniels for coming, Coach McDaniels. You can call him Mr. too. Some people call him Mr. Coach. I'm out.